Welcome to Gray to Great, the podcast where we will pull back the curtain on what it truly takes to thrive as a corporate retirement plan advisor in today's tech-powered business world. I'm Dan Deacon, but all my friends call me Triple D. As a former sales leader and CEO and now board member of the parent holding company of the Great Gray Trust Company, I know that success in this field goes beyond the numbers. In each episode, I'm going to team up with one of your peer retirement plan advisors to bring you the strategies that separate the best from the rest. From prospecting and referral business to challenger selling and tech adoption, we're diving deep into the parts of the business that too many of us overlook. Whether you're here to sharpen your skills or if you're looking for the next big idea, this is where the playbook gets rewritten. So get ready for sharp, actionable insights that'll take your practice to the next level. Because in sales, there's no gray area. Hello, Sean. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too, Dan.
All right. So for our listeners, I'll introduce myself. Sean, I'll ask you to do the same. First of all, welcome everybody to the No Gray Area podcast. Sean Kelly and I, Dan Deacon, are going to have a conversation here about sales, about what great sales best practices look like, and in particular, in the financial services industry, and more narrowly defined around retirement plan advisory work, which Sean does, and not just does, he does quite well, so much so that he is the Southern California Plan Advisor of the Year for 2024, which we're quite proud of and eager to tap into Sean's expertise, experience, and insights on best practices. Sean and I, you and I first met at the RPAG event in Southern California back a couple months ago. That was a lot of fun. I'm sure we'll end up hitting on some of the same points we hit in that panel discussion that you and I were doing. But maybe a quick update would be great to hear. We talked then about the fundamentals in sales and how universal great sales fundamentals are across industries, and which makes it possible for somebody like me who grew up in the software business, and now I'm a board member, an advisor, and investor with Great Gray, can apply and understand some of the same principles you've implemented in the financial services business. So maybe giving us some more background on that and what you've been doing since we talked would be useful.
Yeah, thank you, Dan, very much, and appreciate the opportunity to be with a mogul like yourself. You're right, sales is the same across really any industry as well as client service. For those that weren't at the RPAG event, my name is Sean Kelly. I'm with Heffernan Financial Services. I've been focused on 401k since 2007. So this is the business that I've been in as a financial advisor for quite some time. And, really as our industry evolves, whether it's Secure Act 2.0 or everything that's coming after that, staying out in front of it and making sure that everything that's available and everything that our clients need to be aware of and helping clients feel heard just by listening is what I'm always up to. I mean, your question specifically was, what have I been up to since? And really, it's just doing the same thing that I've always been doing and evolving it as our industry evolves and making sure that our clients are out in front of it.
That's great. Well, let's start with that first part you described, Sean, which I can tell you're particularly adept at, which is getting clients to open up about to yield for you the gold that becomes the essence of a great customer-seller relationship over many years. And that gold is them sharing their insights. And in financial planning, there's nothing I think that's more core to the essence of who we are as human beings and our hopes, fears, aspirations as talking about financial security. So share with us, if you would, how do you unlock that in developing rapport and putting a client at ease to where they're willing to share with you the right kind of background to give you the ability to use your listening skills to end up crafting a scenario that is optimal for their objectives?
Sure. Great question. And I think you hit the nail on the head just by using the word human being. And that's really the way that, I try and I do relate to all of the clients and when they're prospective clients that, I'm trying to win their business. And then once they become clients, just listening to them, you're right. All the hopes, dreams, fears, goals, that exist in somebody's personal life exist in one way or another in how they do business or the business that they own or as an executive or as a day-to-day operational person. So it's really just listening to them and asking the right questions and, doing a lot more listening than talking initially. And it's interesting, ultimately, all of my clients become friends. right, at some point, because you're not just talking about business. You're really, truly, genuinely, I don't know if it's the Irish in me or what, but I'm really interested in what's going on in people's lives, and, that type of kind of relationship. And then that just builds from, taking what I know as, what I do for a living, what I'm licensed to do, what I'm trained to do, and what I study and continually evolve with, in the 401k, 403b, any sort of retirement plans. And I just implement that with listening, again, to what you said: hopes, dreams, goals. Ultimately, what we're doing, the objective, is to help people, Americans, retire with dignity on their own terms after a lifetime of hard work. The retirement plan, whether it's a 401k, 403b, or any other type of retirement plan, is the vehicle to do that, right? So how do we make that possible? How do we get employees engaged? How do we get companies engaged? How do we get people to actually take action? Those are all the things that those are our challenges, and that listening helps get us to, instead of me trying to tell them what I think is best, hearing what they need and then fulfilling that need.
That's great. And it's a bit like, I imagine, playing the role of a therapist, which in
Yeah,
you've trained clinically. One of my children is, so I'm getting a crash course in this. You're supposed to resist the temptation to jump right in and say, okay, I've got you figured out. Here's what you need to do. That would probably be a lot more efficient, but maybe not as productive, and you wouldn't own it. So how do you, and I also appreciate you, Sean, sharing your Irish heritage, which I share as well, which when I started my sales career, I actually had to deal with on a level where I had to ask more brief questions that are open-ended, because I found I was so eager to share what I knew. I asked these sentences, run-on sentences, these long
yeah.
questions, kind of like at a coaching press conference after a game where some member of the media gets excited and they ask a 5-minute question. You're like, what, was there a question in there? So how do you do that to master relevance right next to brevity, which can feel almost at odds with each other?
That's a good question. I think it's different for everybody, right? And I think I'm working on trying to be more observant, right, with what people are actually saying and maybe seeing behind it. I think what I've learned, and this goes beyond being an advisor and being a customer service representative, a salesperson, whatever you want to call all the different things that I do and my colleagues in the industry do. You can There's always something going on behind what you experience with somebody, with a client, and kind of understanding or leaving it open for that, is really how I try to determine, how I'm going to present what I know they need, right? And it is, like I said, it does come from listening, but the retirement plan industry is very specific, right? There's a lot of rules, there's a lot of compliance, there's a lot of things that have to be done and have to be done a very specific way. And so making sure that that's fulfilled, but at the same time, making sure that I'm presenting it in a way that have people feel comfortable and have people actually want to do it. Whether I'm talking about servicing the actual plan sponsor and the executives, or the day to day, or the actual employees that we're talking to and meeting with, on a one-on-one basis. You mentioned coaching, and I think that's a really great way to describe whether we're working with investment committees or whether we work with employees. It's really a coach, right? And a coach doesn't just necessarily tell you what to do, but they learn who you are and help you kind of become the best version of yourself. And I just take that and put it into retirement plans, if that makes
That's
sense.
great.
I know I kind of rambled, but that's
No, that's you're hitting on something fascinating as well, Sean, which is the parallels between, just take the three roles, three of the roles you and I share. I'm sure the more time we spend together, we discover others. But parent, coach, and sales and service professional. You have to exercise a lot of the same skills across that spectrum in all three roles, don't you?
absolutely, yeah. I mean, yes, right. And how you teach, or how you relate, or how you correct, right? Yeah, whether it's a parent, a coach, or what my craft is, but they're all related, right? It's just different versions of the spectrum of, this way and that way, and then where what you're going to present or how you're going to help on that spectrum falls depending on who your audience is, right?
That's
Whether
right.
it's your kid or your soccer player or your client.
That's right. So let's pick up on that and move to a related topic that you introduced with the idea of comfort level for that client. All of us, regardless of industry, whether you sell in financial services or technology or healthcare, manufacturing, distribution, what we share in most cases, sales professionals having a wide variety of customers in different varying sizes. So in the industry I grew up in, we'd have customers that were producing, hundreds of millions, if not billions in revenue, and therefore were in their agreements with our software company doing millions of dollars of business with us every year. And some customers at the other end of that spectrum, relatively small purchases, maybe higher transaction rates. But yet our challenge was to make every one of those customers feel like our most important customer and like they sat right in the center of our Venn diagram of the ideal customer profile. How do you do that in your world?
That's a good question. It's not easy, right? It's really not easy. And, whether you're looking at it based on size or you're looking at it based on revenue, I mean, this is a business, right? Everybody needs to be able to make a profit, to, do the things that they like to do outside of work and have a career and run a business. I think, just to repeat what I kind of mentioned earlier, it's listening, because if you listen, you're able to really sort of repeat back, or at least deliver back, what is important to somebody, because they told you, right? If you ask the right questions, they're going to tell you exactly what the answer to the calculus is. And so presenting it in a way that is going to resonate, and listening. And, we've built at Heffernan Financial, we've built a scalable model where we can provide this type of coaching to individuals, this type of investment advice to investment committees, the type of financial wellness program that we have, and all of the services that we provide to all of our clients. Different clients get different versions of it, right? Just depending on what they want. But it's just basically, again, listening and being able to allow or make sure that the client feels heard, but also have an organized machine process, basically, that allows you to deliver what we deliver on a scalable level.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then, so that process you're describing, let's expand on that. It certainly suggests the use of technology as an enabler for us to make each of us more scalable in our communications and outreach to our clients, but also to deliver hopefully always better client experience. Tell me what your experience has been with using technology, whether it's sales related technologies. I spent 12 years at Salesforce, so I've got some experience there and certainly a bias. But I'm eager to hear what your experience has been with trying to achieve that scalability from small clients to large, valuing all of them, and using technology as an enabler for you to extend your own personal reach and expand your productivity.
Sure. Great question. And technology is essential. I was kind of, pushing back on that at first, as it was evolving and coming out. But
Why so?
really,
I'm curious.
well, I just thought my way was better, so how I built my book of business was just a lot of cold calls. Right. And I thought that my process for tracking those cold calls and what I spoke about or the message I left or when I called and when I emailed was better. And then utilizing a piece of technology that allows me to track it better, allows me to have more of a process. Because from a sales, so I'll start with sales and technology. From a sales standpoint, I'm not allowed to say the word guarantee, right? As a financial advisor, as a licensed financial advisor, but I can guarantee you, it doesn't matter what you're selling. It doesn't matter what you're selling. If you have a process and you stick to it, just by just by the numbers, just by statistics, you'll be successful as long as you show up and you do it and you make the call, you send the email, you stop by. It just works as long as you keep doing it. So having a proper way of technology to track that and, maybe make it more efficient of how I return the phone calls, who I return the phone calls to, who I send the emails to, who I follow up with from a sales standpoint has been night and day, as far as building my book of business. But then when it comes to client service, it's the same thing, and I think a good example of that is, I mentioned we provide financial coaching to the employees of all of our clients. And at Heffernan Financial, we have over 50,000 participants, or close to, probably. And, obviously not all of them are
online experiences that they can have, like one-to-many sessions.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say that. One of the, so pre-COVID, we were meeting with everybody one-on-one in person. That's what everybody preferred, in the lunchroom or wherever. Right. But right before COVID happened, we said, hey, why don't we set up a iPad at some of these companies in a cubicle somewhere where the people could go on, we could FaceTime with them and do it that way so we could be more accessible. And then COVID happened and Zoom took over. And so now it's just the norm. And we still meet with employees one-on-one. We're absolutely, willing and love doing that. But what we found is with Zoom or any sort of interface like we're using, a participant can bring in a dad, a mom, a husband, a wife, a brother, sister to that meeting. And we can have a conversation with them. They feel more comfortable because there's somebody that they trust with them and talking to us, and have that kind of that discussion, which ends up being just financial organization anyways. At the beginning, it's not us giving them specific financial advice typically at the beginning. It's just helping people get organized. So yes, from that standpoint, but also when we do get into the where should you invest and that type of thing, as fiduciaries, we have to have a process. It has to be documented. And so we use a technology, a risk tolerance technology that I think is one of the best out there. It basically asks questions like, instead of saying, hey, are you conservative or are you moderate, right? People don't know what that means typically. Right. They might think there's something.
And it can be widely interpreted. And today's an interesting day to be bringing that up.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm not conservative, I'm liberal or whatever. Exactly. But you don't know. And then you go into something that's conservative and it stays static. So we have a technology that asks, how much do you have in your 401k? And you say, okay, I got $60,000. And it says, okay, are you comfortable seeing your balance go down, $8,000 if it could potentially go up $14,000 in a 6-month period? And somebody says, yeah, I think I'm comfortable with that. So the next question is, okay, are you comfortable seeing it go down 12,000 if it can go up 20,000, whatever the math is? And that's how we determine what their risk tolerance is. So using dollars instead of, vague terms is a technology that's helped.
Yeah, because if you give me a scale of 1 to 10, which I'm used to seeing in a survey, I'm not sure how to translate that to real world pragmatic decisions like your highlights. That's great that you can frame it for people as a function of how much they have in savings.
Right.
Make it much more meaningful. So you're touching on an area, Sean, that I even, all of us probably have, consider ourselves some level of financial competence, IQ, if you will, financial IQ. And it's probably achieved through everything we read, things we see on TV, and probably not often enough based on conversations with experienced professionals like yourself. So in a field where I'm guessing most consumers like me, I'll admit, I'm probably reticent to acknowledge my lack of understanding or to expose my naivete or ignorance about certain financial instruments or whatnot. How do you make me, a client, feel smart or at least not feel stupid, while at the same time providing valuable insights that I can act on? I find it's a real delicate balance to inform your audience, but at the same time not make them feel uninitiated or uneducated. How do you balance that?
That's a good question. And so it's different for each client, but trying to borrow from a lot of the experts in our industry, like George Fraser, for example, he's a industry leading advisor. He's been an advisor for quite some time. He came up with a concept where instead of saying, hey, instead of us as advisors proposing to a group education session, telling everybody that they should maybe think about considering, or they should consider contributing 10% to their 401k, presenting it as, hey, if you consider taking a dime out of every dollar you make and putting it into a long-term savings account that belongs to you, well, now you're saving 10% into a 401k. So terms like that, kind of breaking it down just to make it more relatable. But also I put a video together. I showed it at the RPEG conference. We have a few chickens and some tortoises and things at our house, a lot of animals.
Please tell that story. That's really engaging. Yeah.
So we have a lot of animals at the house, and probably more than we should. So hopefully the city, whoever checks those things isn't watching this. But, I was thinking about it. This was during COVID or right after. And I was looking at one of our hens, and it just kept laying these eggs. And we hatched some of them because we had a rooster. And this hen just kept producing these eggs. So I was thinking it was like compound interest, right? You have a hen that lays 3 eggs. Those 3 eggs hatch, right? And then those, 3 chickens, if they're hens, they grow up, have eggs of their own. And that's compound interest, basically. So I put a video together like that, kind of explaining compound interest, through the eyes of a hen laying eggs and that going down. And I think that's helpful as well.
It's a great illustration.
Yeah, just trying to help.
It's adorable having your then very young daughter in the video with you holding the chicken and bringing the narrative. It's very cool.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So you also, as we plan to wrap up here, before we break, what I'd like to also give this audience a chance to hear is what you shared when we were in Laguna Niguel at that RPHA event. And you were talking about prioritizing your customers. You had some advice for plan advisors on how to take your core clients you have the best relationships with and how to expand that and replicate that. I think sharing that here would be really useful for this audience.
Yeah, I think that it depends. It depends how you might base it on revenue, you might base it on assets, you might base it on participants. But if you made a list of all of your clients, and next to the clients that love you the most, right? That just really would put in the ones that you use for when you fill out an RFP for the reference, right?
Right.
What do they love about you? And then go down the list. Make sure to not leave the other ones behind, right? Make sure to look at what they love about you, but that actually might not necessarily be the same for everybody, right? So as far as a priority goes, I think that making sure that you're always looking at. I have it's not sitting here, it's at the other office, but a whiteboard where I have every single client listed. And if I look over there and haven't talked to somebody because I do semi-annual investment reviews and we haven't anything to talk about and I haven't talked to them in 4 months, I'm just going to pick up the phone and call them, or at least shoot them an email and say, hey, just thinking about you. Is there anything I can do? Hope everything's well. And that goes that goes over so well. People just really feel kind of appreciated and valued by just checking in. And I think that that's probably the biggest way that I make, besides just the service that we provide, but that I make clients feel appreciated and valued, is I just stay in touch with them. I don't let it go very long without just an email or a phone call.
And as sophisticated as are all the sales technologies we've seen deployed in the last few decades, and our talk now, the next wave of the influence of AI on all technology areas, but especially in customer-facing operations, and the sophisticated sales methodologies, and whether you're in any of these industries we talked about, the fundamental you just mentioned, making clients feel special, making them feel important, making them feel valued, making them feel heard, that fundamental never goes away. That will never go out of style. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's back to what you said at the very beginning, Dan. It's just about a human connection. That's all anybody is looking for. It doesn't matter if it's work, if it's romantic, if it's family, if it's friends, if it's somebody at the coffee shop. That's all anybody is looking for. And so I think that, what we described as simple as just picking up the phone and calling someone or shooting an email makes them feel that way. And it's
Yeah.
not fake, right? It's genuine. Like I said, all of my clients have become friends, so I'm genuinely interested in what's been going on in their life. And if there is something that I know about that might need to follow up, I'm absolutely following up to see, hey, how's your dad doing, or hey, how's everything going with this situation
Yeah.
that you shared. So
Now, that's a fascinating area of personal relationships and the development. We talked a bit in Southern California when we met about, speaking of old school themes, the old book by Dale Carnegie, How to Win
mhm.
Friends and Influence People, which never goes out of style because it's based on these fundamentals about being intellectually curious and really being a student of human beings. Do you believe you were born with that, or do you think that can also be coached?
It's a good question. I think it runs through Irish blood for sure. I think it's part of that DNA. But I do
Well, that's
think
what the old
absolutely.
school people call the gift of gab, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and
not
just I mean,
yeah.
I think that I don't know. I think that maybe it can definitely be learned and coached,
Mhm.
but again, and I think it's just from our conversation, Stan, over since we met, like I actually am interested in what people are sharing with me. I'm curious, right,
Right.
and I like to ask questions and learn a little bit more. So for me, I get a hit off of hearing what people are talking about and what's going on in their lives and this experience and that experience. I don't know if that's the case for everybody, but that might be a little bit of a benefit to
Mhm.
my personality at least. But I think that anybody can be genuine and authentic if it. I think it takes a little bit of courage to be open like that, and
Yes.
once you learn how to do that, it absolutely can be coached as well.
Yeah, that's fascinating because the spectrum, whether somebody's really extroverted and very comfortable as a talker, if you will, whether in small groups or in front of an audience, or whether somebody's at the other end of that line of being introverted. I believe everybody can be taught to be intellectually curious, and I like the way you described it. You get a hit out of that. I do believe I'm not a doctor. I think you do get a dopamine hit out of connecting with another human being when you ask them a question about something they've shared with you before, and they give you the feedback like, oh, Sean, that's impressive, you remembered that, my wife's name, or the school my children are going to, or the fact that my daughter's in lacrosse, and you ask about that. there's no better way to show you were actually sincerely interested and you listened, and it came up just out of your memory as associating with the last conversation you had. That is, I find, very rewarding because it's indicative of developing a sustaining client relationship. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think that what you said with, it's not something that you heard and went and wrote down so you could bring it back later and just, be fake about it, right? It's because you actually went, oh, St. Anne's. Okay, yeah, that's great. My buddy was on the board there once and this, that, and the other, and, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just, again, like you said, it's about human connection, and that is human connection, right? When you connect with somebody on something that's either important to them or has an influence on their lives, whether it's good or bad, being able to relate to it or connect to it is, but also this is interesting too, not pulling it away from them where, you hear what they have to say. Maybe they're experiencing some illness in the family or whatever, and then sort of make it about you, right? We say, well, this happened in my family too, and pulling it back. I mean, you can relate to it, but like just being a good listener. Again, I think it's a very important part
to show that you can relate to it, but not all of a sudden turn the story for the next half an hour into you telling your tale. That's I've seen people get lost in that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
That's where it's good to have a good teammate in a sales team to pull you back from the edge on that sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Well, Sean, this has been as I fully expected, and as it was when we met in Southern California. This has been a great conversation. I appreciate you taking the time, sharing your insights. And I have a feeling we'll do this again and expand the topic. So I thank you, and I wish you the best of luck, and we will stay in touch.
Yeah, thank you, Dan, very much. I appreciate it. I feel like all I did was ramble, but hopefully there's a few nuggets that can help somebody.
No doubt there is.
Be better. Thank you very much.
Take care, brother. Cheers.
Take care. You too. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Gray to Great. I hope you're walking away with a few new ideas, a few bold strategies, and a bit more fuel to take your business further than ever. If you found today's conversation valuable, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with a colleague. The best way to stay sharp is to keep learning together. So I'll see you next time right here where we will cut through the noise to bring you what really matters. Until then, keep pushing forward because there's no gray area in achieving success.